Thanks for taking the time to download this BBC Radio 5 Live podcast. To search for other podcasts you might like, click bbc.co.uk/5live, where you'll also find our terms of use.
Tonight it's a special World Football phone-in, you know. I don't know if we've ever had two international tournaments, both alike in dignity, as Shakespeare would say. One from over the other side of the Atlantic and one from over this side. The Euros have, of course, kicked off in spectacular fashion in Paris. But don't forget the Copa America stateside, even though it is a South American football tournament. Very confusing, of course. But here to unravel any confusion and to tell us the delights of their respective competitions, the Legendina over that side and the Colonel over this side, Tim Vickery and Mina Rizuki, respectively. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning. You're joining me in very dramatic circumstances because we're in the first game of the night here. It's the defending champions Chile against Venezuela. We are in the 7th minute of second half stoppage time, 1-1. And Chile have just been awarded a penalty. So the defending champions, who are having a frustrating time, looks like they've got a chance to record a win with what will be the last kick of the game, and it's all going off at the moment. There's rages and arguments with the players and rages and arguments on the benches. It's one of those handball decisions which is very difficult, which always makes me think I'm very, very glad I'm not a referee. Yeah. But once all the hubbub calms down, Chile will have a penalty. They won the title last year on a penalty shootout. Wouldn't it be an irony if they missed this penalty? But I'll tell you what happens when it happens.
Well, you do wonder why all the hubbub, because you know the referee's not going to change his mind anyway. It's going to be a penalty one way or another. But was that a gasp from you, Colonel? Was that a gasp?
Yes, it was a gasp, because I kind of want Chile to win.
It's not personal, you know. This is we're football correspondents. We're above that, are we?
I know. I was just like, oh wow, you know. Sorry, it's just because I wasn't.
Let her have a preference.
She can have a gasp. She can have a gasp. She can have a gasp.
I like everyone, really. I
would have thought after the France-Romania match in Paris that, you know, anything that happens over Copa America is hardly worth a gasp from you, Colonel. That was gasp-worthy, surely.
Well, I was a little irritated that my prediction didn't come true, but sure.
Wow. Can't win them all. Can't win them all. Lots of questions from both of you, your respective tournaments as well. Hope you're geared up for what's to come. A lot of coverage of the Euros tonight. Do you want to start off, first of all, Mina, sum up the match tonight, which had a penalty in it as well, and there were lots of hubbubs around the referee at the time?
Yeah, there were a lot of hubbubs, and potentially that there should have been another penalty with Koscielny making something similar in that. I don't know. It depends on what you think, but it was an exciting match because I think everyone thought that Romania is just going to be this really defensively solid group of players that weren't really going to try to attack in any way, shape or form. They had the best defensive record in qualifiers, but actually they produced something a little bit more than just a defensive performance. I think France were a little bit disappointing. You wanted to see more, but obviously Olivier Giroud missed a couple of his chances, came through in the end. Romania had the best chance in the first 2 minutes. You thought Hugo Lloris made a fabulous save. Then there was another corner. It went just over the goal. And you thought, oh, wow, Romania's not bad. It's sort of, you know, after those initial minutes, France settled in. The nerves settled in. You could see it was an emotional match. You could see a lot was riding on it, whereas Romania were playing a little bit with more freedom, let's say, able to really enjoy the circumstances, knowing that a loss doesn't really mean anything huge for them in the same way that it mattered to France. Giroud finally scored his goal, and then Romania equalized with a penalty, and it was Patrice Evra giving it away. Patrice Evra is also, coincidentally, the man who got Juventus knocked out against Bayern Munich. So quite large mistakes that the kid's been making recently. Then, of course, there was Dimitri Payet and his fantabulous performance throughout. He was just an exceptional player, honestly. Just pulling the strings from everything. He was the one who managed the assist for Giroud's goal, and then he just scored a winner of all winners. It was the most beautiful goal, so technical, just a shooter right left top corner, perfect goal from him. And he won the match for them and then cried when he was taken off because the emotions got to him.
Yeah, 0500 909 693. You might have some comments yourself about the opening match in the Euros tonight. What a cracker it was, or not, as the case may be. First half, maybe questionable. And Tim, has that penalty kicked off yet?
It has, yeah, in the 100th minute of a 90-minute match. Mina's boy, Arturo Vidal, stepped up, took the penalty for Chile. Keeper one side, ball the other. 2-1 Chile. Still time for Bolivia to miss a clear chance, only their second shot of the night, a clear chance that would have kept them alive in the competition. We're still going. We're in the 12th minute of second half stoppage time. And as it stands, it's Chile 2, Bolivia 1, and that makes Bolivia eliminated from the competition. And the final whistle has just gone.
Oh, I was going to say it's not over yet. I was about to say it's not over yet. Okay, as the final whistle has gone, let's ask this question from Miguel, who wants to know what the level of play has been in the Copa so far. Can we expect a disappointing surprise combo in the Euros like Uruguay, Venezuela? To you, Mina, in a moment. First of all, the level of play?
It started disappointingly. I think there are a number of reasons for that. And one is that there is a lack of quality here in some of the teams, without doubt. Another, the kick-off times. Thankfully, we're over the very early kick-off times, but poor Costa Rica and Paraguay, they played out a 0-0 draw in absolutely sweltering afternoon heat in Orlando, Florida, it was just cruelty to them to play in those conditions. Also, the first game in a tournament, it's often difficult to judge teams on the first games because there's lots of nerves, and I think we've seen that especially from the CONCACAF sides, and the United States didn't really do themselves justice in the first game. Panama, although they beat Bolivia, they look very, very nervy. So I think you have to start getting to the second games before teams begin showing their true colours. And also there's the question of just how early this competition has kicked off. You know, it's a full week before the Euros, which means less time for the players to recover from the rigours of the European season. So a disappointing start, but it's opening out and it's getting better and it's looking more intriguing by the day. We're just about to have in a few minutes the second game of the night, which is Argentina-Panama. Lionel Messi not starting for Argentina, not fully recovered, but we are expecting him to come off the bench.
Yeah, it could have started disappointingly for the Euros as well, Mina. Just that question about, can we expect a disappointing or a surprise Euros? What do you think?
Well, it depends on what your definition is of disappointing.
Well, Miguel compares disappointing with the match between Uruguay and Venezuela in the Copa America. That's what he calls disappointing.
Okay, so something that's like not a thrilling final.
Yeah, boring.
I think the whole tournament's going to be boring, to be honest. I used to be such an optimist when it came to football, but I'm somewhat of a pessimist now. Looking at the teams and going through them and then looking at the potential starting lineups for all the countries involved, it's expanded. You thought that maybe there's an option of it being, you know, thrilling. Will there be another Greece in 2004? Will there be another Denmark? But it's just, everyone's tactics seem to be a little defensive, to be honest. You have some teams who know how to play. It's really weird because everyone's playing rather defensive football and in a counter-attacking strategy, but not many teams have a very good defense or good defenders. So although we saw from France, didn't we, when Romania equalised, they went on the attack. They didn't play defensively then. They went on the attack. It's exactly that. There are a few teams that obviously are not going to be able to play that kind of way, Croatia being one of them. France is another one. Teams that are set up to attack. Italy like to pretend that they're going to go out and attack, but let's be honest, it's Italy. But all in all, if you look at the teams, Albania, great defense, you know, more of a sort of a dull sort of working team. Italy, really just better off defending themselves. Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland are hard workers. I can't really see a team that's thrilling for me. And what's even more sort of disappointing is teams like Germany, which have so much talent in their squad, unfortunately have lost a lot of defenders to injury and so on and so forth. Yeah. What they've done is had to learn two types of football. So one of them they're going to play at the start, which is now during the group stage and perhaps even in the last round of 16, which is, a little bit more of a united type of football, one that is reliant a little bit more on counter-attacking strategy, one that perhaps could use the skills of Mario Gomez, and I say skills in quotation marks. And then, of course, there's the other type of football, which they hope to play against better teams, which is a bit more expressive, a bit more expansive, a little bit more Spain, a little bit more interesting. So it all depends. I think this is going to be a very tactical tournament. Yeah. If you're like me, you enjoy that, then great, But honestly speaking, I don't think you're going to find like these wonderful goals and these spectacular teams, because also you look at teams like Turkey or Belgium, they have really great players in certain departments, like their attacking midfield, but then they're lacking something in other areas. Yeah. So that's what it is. There's no team that has like great depth or great players in every single position, or at least in the majority of positions. It all seems to be a bit scattered,
Let me put something in quotation marks that Shakespeare never quite said, but hell hath no fury, like a certain lady's barbed comments. But let's leave that to one side, and we'll find out where you both are very shortly with all that background atmosphere.
Hell hath no fury, like a woman who's criticising a player who doesn't get back and work hard defensively.
Exactly, that's the one. 0500 909 693 is the number to call if you'd like to join us for this morning's very special World Football phone-in, talking Copa America and the Euros as well. Jonathan in Switzerland. Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing this morning?
Yeah, I'm doing fine, by the way. But be careful you don't get on the wrong side of me now. Taking no prisoners tonight, mate. No prisoners tonight.
I'll do my best. Well, I have a tactical question for the Colonel. I was just wondering, at this year's Euro, what will be the fashionable formation amongst the 24 teams, and which of the teams will break out of that mold, I guess you could say?
That's a good question. Very good question.
So which is like, there is no particular tactical formation, let's say, that they're all going to go for. The one that everyone seems to love a lot will always be the 4-2-3-1. That's the most fashionable one. There are quite a few teams who are testing out a three-man backline, which is quite interesting, to be honest, because I'm a firm believer that it's not a good one, despite the fact that obviously we see it a lot in Italy.
Then 3-5-2.
3-5-2, or a 3-4-3. Is that? Am I getting my maths wrong here?
Yeah, slightly wrong, but never mind. It's okay. Your maths is okay. Don't worry about that.
Like, for example, Northern Ireland has recently been playing a 3-5-2 formation. Obviously, Italy, we know, are going to try, obviously, play like that as well. There are other teams that are going to be looking at that just because it's a way of getting the midfielders involved, making it a five-man back line, which just goes to show you that we are sort of veering into Atletico Madrid territory, which is now more of a, keep the defense secure and then counterattack when you have that possibility. This is the evolving world and the evolving nature of football at the moment. Everyone is trying to copy those who are doing well. And obviously those who are doing well are the likes of Atletico Madrid. So I don't think anything's going to be super exciting. I think those who are the best prepared, which are the likes of Germany, as I explained before, who are able to play different types of formations, will be interesting. Of course, they don't really have a defense that will maybe help them out potentially. But it's got to be a team that knows how to do both things. For me, at the moment, Spain looks like it's the most balanced. They have a team that know how to play expressive football. They have a good defense. They have a good obviously a spectacular midfield and a good attack. And they're able to counterattack with the likes of Alvaro Morata or try to keep possession and make it interesting. Again, Germany looks like they are a team that are probably quite well prepared. I don't know what's going to happen at the back. France is a team that has talent in all areas of the pitch. The defense may struggle, but this is what I find interesting. Considering it's such a defensive game in Europe, not very many teams have very good defenders or boast them. Portugal, for example, is another example of a severely annoying team to watch. They really just try to keep it solid and try to rely a little bit on Ronaldo going forward. You look at their back line and everyone's over the age of 30. They are just such a dull team to watch. And despite that, they look
None of that ageism. Come on. There are people on this phone in who are over 50, and I'm not the only one.
By the way, if this makes any of a difference, I was looking at the Italian team and what Antonio Conte called up, and for once in my life, I actually thought I wouldn't mind Totti in this team because it's just so bad that maybe he can bring some sort of flair to it.
Well, Jonathan, what about from a Swiss perspective, though? Given that you're in the same group as France and Romania, is there trepidation or excitement in Switzerland tonight?
I know, speaking of Switzerland, they're a team that changes formation, every two games? You've tried out 7, no?
She had to throw that in.
Seven formations in 14 games. That's got to be a record.
Well, I think here in Switzerland, people are pretty optimistic that they'll make it through the group. And looking at the group of players that they have, there are a lot of good players in that squad, and a lot of players who are, playing in the Premier League, including the recently signed Arsenal midfielder Xhaka. But I watched the last 2 games. I was actually at the game between Switzerland and Belgium, and I wasn't too impressed with Switzerland. But then again, tournaments change everything, and I think that supposedly there's a good atmosphere in the group right now, and I think if they can come together at the right moment, I think they could make it, fairly far in this tournament.
And the match that you saw, what formation did Switzerland play? You've just heard what Mina said. So if it was a Tuesday, it was 4-4-2. If it was a Wednesday, it was anybody else's guess. What formation did they play?
To be quite honest with you, I don't recall. I was too busy looking at the Belgian team and all the magnificent players that were on the Belgian team. But I can say that go ahead.
I was going to say, what did you think of Belgium? Do you think they can go far?
I really think that. I hope they go far. I guess you could call me a bit of a football hipster, and I really hope the Belgians really pull out a good tournament. But I think they are lacking in defensive solidity, and it was interesting because Mark Wilmots, he played during that match. He played for Malen and Alderweireld in the back 2 in the central defensive position, and I'm curious as to why they aren't playing Vertonghen and Alderweireld in the center back positions, because those two played together at Tottenham all season.
Don't tire them out. Don't tire them out. We want them next year.
It's just the most ridiculous decision not to play them in centre back roles.
Yeah. Well, so now I was just going to say, I think, Tim, this is the first football hipster we've had on the programme. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't really know what the expression means. I've been away too long. There's all these words and this language. What does it mean?
I don't know what it means either, Jonathan.
From my definition, it's that they like teams that are not the brand.
Well, I guess for me, it basically, I have a tendency to support teams that really don't win much. I've always said that, you never, I believe that you don't choose your football club. It's your football club that chooses you. And I'm actually a cottager. I support Fulham FC, and, I love that team so much. I can't watch their matches here in Switzerland because, the championship isn't broadcast over here. So, but luckily, Fulham has an app, and I can listen to the matches on radio, and I never grew up in an age where I listened to any sport over the radio, so it's been a new experience having Fulham in the championship, because I've been listening to radio, radio football, which is great. So.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate you telling us what football hipster is. I'm going to keep that one close to me. Are Belgium in the tournament, though?
Yeah, they're playing Italy in the first game on Monday.
See, I'm sorry, But
I don't get this. Why is everyone so obsessed with Belgium? I feel like I'm missing out on something, because I don't get why they're everyone's team.
Well, maybe because they've got some decent players there, and we've seen them in the Premier League, and we're talking about them, I guess. 0500 909 693. So we're talking about both the Copa America and the Euros tonight on the World Football Phone. And if you've got questions for Mina Rizuki, the Colonel, and the Legendino, incidentally, Legendino Tim Vickery, you are in New York now, are you?
No, I'm still in Rio. I'm flying up tomorrow, so I get in Sunday morning to New York. So the land of Uncle Sam hasn't seen me yet, but it will.
Peter in Manchester says, what are Mina and Tim's thoughts on outside top scorer predictions? And he has suggested Paulo Guerrero for the Copa and Mike Batshuayi for the Euros. Paulo Guerrero, first of all, Tim.
Not this time, I think. And he was top scorer, I think, in the last 2 Copas. But pretty difficult this time, I think, for him with Peru. And Peru have played twice. The third game coming up is against Brazil. And it looks like it might be a game that they have to win in order to survive in the competition. So the likelihood is that Paulo Guerrero will only have 1 more game. So I think he's an unlikely top scorer this time around.
And who would be the person that you'd go for as an outside bet for a top scorer? So, i.e.,
well,
not
maybe.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say not in the main, not Argentinian and not Brazilian, if possible.
Well, I was going to say Felipe Coutinho, and he got a hat trick the other night against Haiti.
Fair enough.
And it's his best form in a Brazil shirt. I mean, his problem with the Brazil team has been he's been third choice behind Neymar and Douglas Costa. Neither of them are here. In his previous opportunities, he's looked very timid. But this time it's starting to happen for him. And getting a hat-trick, I think, the other night will do his morale a world of good. Be very interesting to see how he unfolds during the tournament. And also how Brazil unfold, because there are interesting things happening with Brazil, which hopefully we'll get to talk about during the rest of the show.
So, Miki Butsahayi for Belgium, could he be an outside bet, Mina, for a top scorer in the competition or not?
I don't think so. For me, I'm going for Russia on this one.
Russia?
I'm going for Ziyuba as the guy that's probably my outside bet for top scorer. I think they're a nice little team. I'm not too fond of their centre-backs, only because I'm not going to mention it again, but they're really old. I'm sorry. They're pretty old. Yeah. But other than that, they have a team that's interesting. Ziyuba is
you don't
a guy
win
who
anything
scored...
with kids.
Sorry, no, that's true. You need experience on all levels. But maybe both of them being old, I would have liked to mix, old and young. But he scored 6 goals in the Champions League. He didn't do too well in his first 10 caps and then managed 6 goals in the next 3 games. So he's something interesting. I think that, this is the right tournament for him. He's got great confidence at the moment. He's skillful. He's powerful. And I do like Russia. I think there's something interesting about them. So if they do make it out of the group stage, which I think they will, and they progress, and as they do, I think that he's the man to look out for. Because I don't think Cochrane is going to manage to do anything special. And Slutsky, I think, knows exactly how to get the best out of his striker. So he's my outside bet.
So, Tim, you're off to New York. Well, Matt is already there. Matt, in New York, good morning.
Hey, everyone, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks very much. You know the Legendino's coming your way?
Yeah, it's an honor to have him in the city, to be fair. Really, it is. True honor.
I'm sure, but are you going to hang out at the bunting? Are you going to give him that same kind of...
Ticker tape.
Yeah,
I want a ticker tape parade.
That's how I was going. He wants a ticker tape parade. Can you arrange that, Matt?
Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah, why not?
Why not? He hasn't exactly landed on the moon, You don't give ticker tape parades to anyone. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Don, this is America. Anything can happen.
This is true. Anything. Even a billionaire with a huge tower in the middle of Manhattan can become president. I know that. Yeah.
Let's be honest. We had a billionaire with a bunch of huge towers in the middle of Manhattan run this city for 12 years. So,
this is true.
Not part
this
there
is
from
true.
a president.
Yeah, money talks. So, you got a question for Tim, though. Go ahead.
Yeah. Tim, everyone's really been enjoying the Copa here for a soccer tournament. It's not reaching the level of the NFL or whatever, but everyone is really enjoying it. I'm going to the game tomorrow, it's in Philadelphia. Really looking forward to it. But, I'm getting the impression that some of the people from South America that are, South Americans, not ones living here, but they are a bit turned off by it, and especially from the more traditional countries, Uruguay being principal among them. One, for the way the tournament's gone for them, because it's been basically a complete disaster, 2 games and out. And the other one, because of the way they were treated, being given the real shaft compared to the way Mexico was, who were in the same group. Is the way that this was set up, is this going to prohibit a 16-team Copa being staged in the future, even if it's in the normal rotation, not an extra tournament, but a 16-team tournament every 4 years? Is the way that they treated really going to stop that?
It was mute. There was rumours in the week that this would be the Copa America from now on. 16 teams every 4 years, only in the United States. And the first thought that came to my mind, well, the first thought that came to my mind is that the smaller South American countries would never, ever agree to that, because what that effectively is saying is they can never stage a senior international tournament. You know, the ones, say Ecuador's never going to stage a World Cup, but it does stage Copa Americas. You're saying that it's never going to stage anything. And the Copa, one of the things that the Copa has done in recent years when it's been staged in South America is that it's been an excuse, if you like, for very centralised countries to decentralise their football, to invest in stadiums outside the capital. And when Argentina had it in 2011, only the final was in Buenos Aires. You know, they took everything else elsewhere in a bid to decentralise. And that's been fairly standard. So it does serve a purpose. Where are we going to go with this long term? I really don't know. And I suspect that the main future of this cooperation between the two confederations will come in a tournament at club level rather than perhaps at national team level, because I see that as more convenient. And one of the things that is difficult with this extra Copa that we put in this year is the calendar. It's difficult to squeeze it in. One of the reasons for the slight reticence from the South American point of view is that they're in the middle of World Cup qualification. For some of them, it's a little bit of an inconvenience. And for Uruguay, I understand their feelings, because on Uruguay, in the same group as Mexico, it's not only the fact that the Uruguayans lined up to listen to the national anthem from Chile, it's the fact that Uruguay's itinerary was drawn up by a 4-year-old with a felt-tip pen. They just have to cross the country from coast to coast for every game, while Mexico have 3 games relatively close together. Now, that's not just about benefiting Mexico. It's about filling the stadiums, box office, the land of unbridled capitalism, after all. But it has left a little bit of a bad taste in the mouth, I think, for the Uruguayans. You know, because it's a small country, doesn't have that many travelling fans, so its clout at the box office is not that great. But it is proving a more interesting tournament than I expected. I'm really enjoying it. I'm really looking forward to being up there and seeing the atmosphere inside the stadium, seeing how far it's going beyond just the football aficionados and the immigrant communities. I think that the most interesting thing of all is this is a glimpse of the future, because I can't see any point of merging the two confederations, but I can see considerable scope for cooperation in the future, even that in the long term this proves to be more at club level than at national team level.
Yeah, Matt, you don't know where that 4-year-old with the felt-tip pen is now, do you?
Well, I think actually comparing Uruguay's itinerary to a 4-year-old with a felt-tip pen is an insult to 4-year-olds with felt-tip pens. I mean, you know, it was a complete disgrace. I mean, to be fair, though, it wasn't a whole lot worse than what the U.S. had in Brazil last summer, but that's or 2 summers ago, excuse me. But that's different. I mean, if they hold this tournament every 4 years in the United States, that is a complete and utter disgrace. And Tim talked about the unbridled capitalism, the land of unbridled capitalism. I believe that was Asuncion, where the CONMEBOL headquarters are, because they're the ones that signed off on this whole thing. If they sign off on that, that is, I mean, you might as well forget South American football, to be fair. I mean, really, because if you're going to rip the national teams out of there, you know, the club players have already been ripped out by the global market. And if you're going to rip the biggest national team tournament out of that continent, that can't happen. As a one-off, this could be good. But if you have that every time in the United States, that's terrible.
Listen,
with
mate,
you all the way there, Matt.
Yeah, thank you very much. And great to hear the passion as well. Matt in New York there. 0500 909 693. So we're talking the Euros and Copa America. So to the hard way, as they say. The Legendino is on his way to New York. Not quite there yet, still in Rio. And Mina, where are you?
London.
In London, you got your window open, have you?
Have I got my window open? Yeah,
all the trucks in the background, is that from your side or is that from
No,
Rio?
that's from my side.
That's well, it's mine as well. Rio's a very noisy city.
Yeah, noisy.
I often get asked, "Are you outside?" No, I'm in my living room on the 5th floor. But you know, there's a lot of noise out there.
I'm sure there is. 0500 909 693. Let's look ahead as well in the next round of this conversation in a couple of minutes' time to England's match against Russia. Mina's already suggested that the Russian player, what was the name of the player that you thought was an outside bet for the Golden Boot? Zuba. She's already suggested that the Zuba is going to bang in a few goals. But against England, 0500 909 693.
The Russians are coming. The Russians are coming.
Yeah, be afraid. Be very afraid. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's your call, so give us a call. Yeah, Adam stuck the boot into me, by the way, because he says, any chance of me doing my homework? Apparently, I suggested last week that Switzerland weren't in it. This week, I've gone for Belgium. Next week, who knows who it will be? And they probably won't be in it by next week, whoever it is. 0500 909 693. So we're talking Copa America this morning and talking the Euros. The Legendinos in Rio taking care of the Copa America, which is in New York in the United States. Confusingly, Mina Rizuki is over this side taking care of any questions you might have on the Euros as well. And this just quick question, Mina, which is a point that we kind of mentioned a few moments ago, that one of our listeners has picked up on the idea that we're talking about the footballers crowding round the officials when it's penalty time or whatever it might be, and one of our listeners is suggesting why doesn't UEFA do something about that for the Euro Championships? It kind of like it wastes time, doesn't it? And they try and put pressure on the referee, unfair pressure, arguably, and it sort of distracts from the football, does it not, for you, Mina?
There's so much that distracts from football, but that's what football is. It's a human game where people will try to use other methods to win a match. You'll try to get the opposition sent off, or you'll try to get into their heads. You'll try to get them to act crazy. That's kind of what's fun about the sport. I don't think if we're making it so mechanical where everything can be seen on video, every single thing is outlawed, then you take the emotion out of it. And yes, certain teams might benefit from that, but I don't know, how fun would Atletico Madrid be if they weren't constantly, trying to anger all their opponents? I think it makes them interesting to watch. And crowding around the referees, I know this is something that is constantly discussed in England, and it's something that everyone hates, as well as diving, as well as any theatrics. In Italy, they're very much encouraged because it's seen as another way, as an ace up your sleeve, if you can do something that will sort of hinder the opponent, and like the dark arts. There's even a name for it in Furbizia. It depends whether or not, for me, it's a human sport. So there are going to be things and ways that you can try to change, and I know that distracts, but that's the whole point. You surround the referee, you're trying to get your own way. A lot of people used to argue that Barcelona did that a lot in the Champions League, and that's why they hated them. They just thought that they were constantly crying and begging for things to go their way. But you know what? They won. So I don't know. I just feel like everyone should do what they want. It will distract. It will be annoying for certain teams, but you can't just tell people, oh, you have a limit. You have 1 minute to complain. You have 30 seconds. People are going to try to do what they are because they're humans.
Question for both of you from Joe. What about for non-football fans? What does the Copa America and the Euros have to offer for non-football fans, Tim?
Well, first of all, for football fans, 6 minutes in, Argentina have just taken the lead against Panama. Header from Nico Otamendi of Man City. Free kick from Di Maria, once of Manchester United.
Yeah, Joe's not going to be very happy that you answered his question that way. Go ahead.
What it offers, I think, in the United States, what football is, it has the power, more than any other sport, I think, to make people feel represented. Why more than any other sports? I think because of the range of options available to the player on the ball, the range of options of movement that you have. And you can pass the ball backwards, forwards, sideways, on the ground, in the air, diagonally. You don't have to pass the ball, you can dribble. So there are so many options that you have. And the options that you choose have, I think, so much to do with things that you value in cultural terms. So I think that's a fundamental question. How you play football reflects who you are. I think perhaps more than any other sport. So in the Copa America, we've got a fascinating question, I think, about American national identity, North American national identity. How much can football represent national identity in North America? It's often been resistant to the game in the past. With the United States, all right, they got off to a poor start. They lost to Colombia 2-0, but a really good performance, admittedly, against one of the worst organised defences I've ever seen from Costa Rica. Mina would have been absolutely raging watching the Costa Rica defence. 4-0.
Hang on, you've got to say that in a Geordie accent. Costa Rica.
Yeah, Costa Rica, the worst defence I've ever seen in my life from Costa Rica. So US have got a crunch game coming up against Paraguay. Our friend Matt from New York is going to go there to Philadelphia to be at that game. If Paraguay win, then the United States are out. But this, I think, will be. Let's imagine the United States get through. It looks like then a quarter-final against Brazil. That's the way that the competition would seem to be shaping up. Now, USA 94, which was previously the main football event in the nation, USA lost to Brazil on July the 4th, 22 years ago. How much progress has football made in these 22 years? Does it have anything to say now? Does the game have anything to say about US national identity? So I think that's from a kind of sociological point of view, I think that's something really interesting from the Copa.
What about the Euros, Mina? What does it have to offer? And, you know, so we can go to the kind of news headlines that events in Marseille have managed to garner. But let's leave that to one side, because that's not really what the question is asking about.
No, yeah, that's just unsavory things that happen. For me, football, you know, much like Tim Vickery just said, it is a way to unite people. It's a way to stand together, depending on, it doesn't matter where you're from in that country. It doesn't matter what upbringing you've had. Football has just this way of making you feel united in your struggle. And I think that, you know, you have teams now, because it's been expanded, because there are 24 teams that this is their first time. They're teams made up of, a lot of them are second generation, citizens, ones that are now representing their country, a new future for their country, a rainbow nation, if you will. Look at Austria. Look at what they're trying to change going forward. With the fact that they have, you know, different players and players from different ancestral backgrounds, and this is their chance to represent their country and be proud of the changes that are going forward. And I think in a world that's so highly politicized at the moment, where it's seen that if you are, you know, if you can come out and say racist comments, you're just standing up for yourselves in good old Donald Trump way. I think football has a way of sort of going back to the kinder side of humanity. And it's nice to see what Belgium are doing. It's nice to know that when France won it in 1998, it was based on a nation that sort of brought everyone together, that represented different ethnic backgrounds. And that's what's really interesting to watch, how teams are trying to build for the future and bring everyone together. I know this particular France side has been hit with certain comments to do with Benzema's absence, and of course Hassan Ben Arfa and Eric Cantona's comments just adding fuel to the fire. But I think on the whole, if you see what Austria is doing, what you see Belgium is doing, when you see the likes of Switzerland and Albania, I think that it's just it's interesting. And it's also interesting when you have teams like Iceland, which have, 300,000 inhabitants, you know, showing off how much intelligence and how much studying and hard work and investment into grassroots football can bring so much. Northern Ireland, 1.8, a nation that has qualified and is interesting and exciting to watch, if anything, because they fight so hard. It's little things like that. There's the potential of an underdog story. It's great to know that, I mean, not obviously if you're a Dutch fan, but the fact that Netherlands didn't make it, whereas Iceland and Albania and Northern Ireland did. It's that story. It's the fact that there is a chance of there being a Leicester City. There's the hope of a nation being carried. It's different tactical ideas as well, seeing what the best teams or what their vision is of good football. I think for that, I mean, you have to obviously like football to want to watch different tactics, but for other things, I just think it's one time. We have a month in which, you know, much like the World Cup and much like the Olympics, you really do rally and stand behind your country, and for once, you don't look at all the bad things. Yeah,
you know, I'm not a football expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I will say that when Five Live sent me to Portugal for 2004, for the Euros in 2004, you get a real insight when the amount of friendships that are made at tournaments like this. I mean, you don't have to go to the tournaments, but even if you're sitting in your hometown or city, and there will be fans from some of those countries in your local pub or wherever it is, and you strike up conversations that you probably would never have struck up with, with a fan from countries that you know nothing about. And those conversations are fascinating. Yeah, and you get a real insight into the culture of a country through their football fans. You do. I mean, the Croatians, they were just there to have a great party and be the loudest. I remember that from 2004 very much. And we knew that wherever the Croatian fans was, there was a party going on. That's the same with the Scots, of course, and many other. That's why the Scots and Irish fans are so popular across Europe, because they bring to those tournaments a kind of a real sense of bonhomie. And so do most of the English fans, as we know. Now, lots of questions. This one is from Chicago, from Ty in Chicago, who says, I was wondering if Tim had any insight on why Suarez was warming up last night but wasn't eligible to play. It seemed to cause a lot of confusion with everyone watching, myself included. I was hoping he could clarify what went on.
Yeah, it seemed to cause a lot of confusion, not least for Luis Suarez. Now, Suarez was injured. He wasn't on the team sheet, so technically he couldn't come on. He wasn't on the list for that game. But I'm not sure that Suarez himself was fully aware of all of these ramifications. He suffered that muscular injury at the end of the season with Barcelona, and the idea was that Uruguay would take him to the tournament, get him fit during the tournament, and he might play, from the quarterfinals onwards. But then Uruguay find themselves in desperate trouble and needing a goal to stay alive, and he started warming up. Now, I'm not sure if anyone had told him to start warming up. I think he did it himself, so when they made the third substitution, then there's no chance of him coming on, and he went over and remonstrated with the management team, and he was told to sit down, and he just started banging the dugout. But the truth of the matter was, he wasn't on the team sheet. Because of his injury, Uruguay hadn't put him down as a player eligible for that game, so he couldn't have come on. It seems strange that he didn't realise that.
And this is connected maybe, why are Los Charmois so angry? Why can't they play with a smile, says Mike in Coventry?
The Charruas, the Uruguayans.
Charruas.
The Charruas were the Indians, the indigenous people who used to live there, and then the Uruguayans came over from Italy and Spain and took their land and took their drive as well. This Garua drive is seen as a characteristic of Uruguayan football. They can't play with a smile on their face because it's too important to them. As the famous phrase goes, other countries have their history, Uruguay has its football. It's they are defending the flag when they represent their national team, and that mentality is one of the reasons that they punch so much above their weight. This is a country with a population of just over 3 million, and they're still competitive in global terms. And part of that is mentality, but it doesn't make them the best of losers.
And so does the edict go out amongst the players that just whatever you do, don't smile unless we score? And does that apply to the fans as well?
No. And the fans, there's a strong African thing in the way that the game is appreciated in Uruguay with the drums and so on. So it's much more of a party, I think, in the stands. Although it is a country, Uruguay, that does have a certain kind of melancholy about it. So maybe that's something else that comes out on the football field.
You see, that's an answer to Joe's question about what is there for the non-football fan.
Exactly.
We'd never have known about the melancholy of the Uruguayans, would we? This one's for you, Mina, and this is from Darren in London, who hesitates to describe you as a princess because, he clearly realises you're a smart woman. And
I like being called a princess.
Okay, then, Princess Mina. His question is, is it Insigne start for Italy, and can he be one of the stars of the Euros?
I'm sorry, who is Insigne?
I know, that's what I thought. That's what
Do you mean Lorenzo Insigne?
Yeah. Sorry. I was anglicising.
I think you're being harsh on him now. I understand when it's Juventus. I understand, but I think you're being a bit harsh on him.
Insigne sounds like Insigne.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I had to anglicise it the way that my name has been anglicised for 50 years. Dotun adebayo. So I'm getting my own back.
Why not? Yeah. Sorry, what did you say? Can he play a part?
Will he start for Italy, and can he be one of the stars of the Euros?
This is a particular rough note with me because he is the only attacker worth his salt in this Italian team. He is honestly probably, in my opinion, the only one who deserves to be there. Maybe... No, okay, that's a little bit harsh, but he's definitely the most talented. He was ridiculous for Napoli this season. He's got great vision, great feet. He really knows how to dribble the ball, always knows which pass to deliver to the likes of Gonzalo Higuain, contributing to so many goals being scored by the Argentine for Napoli. He's young, he's so Italian, he really identifies with the culture, really wants to do something, so determined. But the really annoying thing about this is he has a fraught relationship with Antonio Conte. Conte, for me, has really disappointed me in so many ways with his choices for the Italian national team. And it's not just me we're talking about. So many of these fans and critics have just disagreed with all his choices going forward. He wants a team that seems to be more warrior-like than talented. I don't think that he's picked the best Italians that he could pick, largely because he left out the likes of Sebastian Giovinco because he plays in the MLS and he thinks that's not good enough, because he left out Jorginho, Bonaventura, and Lorenzo Insigne, who is exceptional, especially when compared to the likes of Eder, who scored only 1 goal since moving to Inter, and the likes of Graziano Pellè, who's very inconsistent, Simone Zaza, who only scores when he comes on as a substitute rather than as a starter. Insigne has something special to him. The only problem about all of this is that he doesn't fit the formation that Conte wants to play. And rather than trying to find one that suits the skills of his best players, Antonio Conte is sticking with the 3-5-2 because he thinks we have the best 3 defenders, we have the Juventus block at the back, and we're just going to go with this. Which I understand his point of view, but you have to be a little bit more versatile and find ways of incorporating your best players, which are the likes of Insigne. So I hesitate to think that I don't think Insigne will play such a large role in this because he can't play in a 3-5-2 formation. He needs to play in a 4-3-3 or something where he's allowed to occupy that wider role. If somehow Conte does shock us and decides to try to be a little bit more versatile, then again, I'm worried that he will opt for the likes of Al Shaarawy over him because they don't seem to like each other very much. I was almost shocked that he was picked in the end, but he is definitely the most talented one at the moment. Unfortunately, Berardi wasn't chosen because they would have been beautiful on opposite flanks, but again, Conte decided to go and ignore another great talent. So I don't think he's going to play a big role for Italy, no.
Grazie, Princessa. Grazie. This is
Principessa. Grazie, Principessa.
You've got an advantage, Tim, because Portuguese.
Well, I don't speak Italian.
Yeah, but it's the same. It's a Latin language, isn't it?
Mi dispiace, ma non parlo.
You're rubbing it in now, man. You're rubbing it. We're Germanic. Remember that. We're Germanic. Let's leave it at that. Sean in Cumbria is saying, I love this show and I'm not even a football fan. Maybe I should get a telly and start watching it instead of just hearing your comments or commentators. Great fun, though. And, you're not going to like this, Tim, because Sion in Bethesda in Cymru, as we know, Cymru are, of course, in the Euros and might even, give England a run for their money. Anyway, but Sion is saying, Tim, I'm still waiting for my royalty check from the time you stole my question about the influence of the Tropicalia movement and turned it into an article for the SBS website.
Yeah, although that did entail reading a book and doing which had he read a book for me?
Did you steal it? No, did you steal it or did you not? Is a question.
He asked a question, and it just set a little thing whirring around in my mind.
So you stole it.
So I then did. I then decided. I then decided to answer the question that had been put. I think that I've fulfilled exactly my function, and I'll do that again now. It's 23 minutes gone. It's still 1-0 to Argentina. Panama having a real go. It's a bit tasty, though. We've already had 5 yellow cards.
I put it to you, Mr. Vickery. You are the defendant. I am the accusator. I'm the lawyer fighting for the prosecution. I put it to you, Mr. Vickery.
Have you got that silly wig on? I want to imagine you in that silly wig.
That's not even funny. My brother is a barrister. He wears that silly wig, and he happens to be the father to the Sligo Rovers right back, Olutobi Adebayo Rowlands. It took an hour, but I got there in the end. 0500 909 693. So we are talking for this evening or morning's very special World Football Phone. You're talking football in the Copa America over that side of the Atlantic, and the Euros, of course, over this side of the Atlantic as well. The Legendino is over that side, and the Colonel's over this side. Tim Vickery and Mina Rizuki, respectively. Any questions you've got for them, I'm sure they'll be more than amenable to take them and to answer them as well. So this one, and this is a really interesting one, and this is kind of for both of you. It is, actually, because there will be disputes, regional disputes like this on both sides of the continent. And again, this goes back to that question by Joe: what's in it for non-football fans? What's in these two competitions for non-football fans? This is slightly controversial, says Nathan in Stoke. That's how he starts off. Potentially controversial question. But in light of the recent ban of Catalan flags at the Copa del Rey final in Spain, and also the European Championship starting tonight, I thought it would make an interesting topic to muse on how well a Catalan team would actually do at the European Championships if they were allowed to participate. So Catalan being that enclave in northern Spain that would include Barcelona, essentially, and other teams around there as well. So Real Sociedad, Catalan as well, as I remember, and several other teams. Anyway, Basque, they are. Oh, they're Basque. Okay, apologies. Okay, Espanyol is Catalan then. Apologies. So he says, I've assumed everyone who could represent Catalonia over Spain would choose to, which may be somewhat contentious. However, that led me to this team. This is Nathan's suggestion of a Catalan team in the Euro Championships. Kiko Casilla in goal, right back Alex Vidal, left back Jordi Alba, centre back Gerard Piqué and Marc Bartra, and defensive midfielder would be Sergio Busquets. Central midfielder would be Cesc Fabregas. Central midfielder again is Sergi Roberto. On the right wing there would be Gerard Deulofeu. On the left wing Christian Tello, and the centre forward would be Bojan Krčić. So do the panel think this is the best selection? I know that's more to you, Mina. I was loath to leave out Xavi Hernandez, he says, but really don't know if he's still capable of competing at the highest level any longer. More importantly, how far do the panel think that this team would go in the competition, both of the technical ability throughout the side and then the togetherness that competing for a newly formed nation brings? I honestly think they could go deep into the later stages, and further than Spain. Would love to hear your thoughts, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Tim, if there are regional disputes there that could emerge, a team from that emerge in the same way. But first of all, to you, Mina.
I'm just trying to think. Montoya there is as well, but I probably would involve Xavi with this team. Would they do better than Spain? Also, would you have Victor Valdez as goalkeeper? I know that he hasn't played very often, but anyway, I'm stretching it. I don't know whether they would do better than Spain. I would hazard a guess that they wouldn't, just because their front line is not as interesting, and I don't think as good as what Spain has at the moment going forward.
But remember, this is Spain without those Catalan players.
Yeah, I'm looking at the ones that they have now, Adruiz, Alvaro Morata, and, and also their midfielders, even the ones that they've ignored from the likes of Saul and Isco, I think are a better bet going forward than what Catalonia would have. The difference is defensively, if you have Gerard Piqué and Bartra, Jordi Alba, and Alex Vidal on the back, then I'm thinking that's a really great back line. And Spain would suffer without their Catalans over there. So that would be interesting. I certainly think that if they were independent and they had their own team in the Euros, they'd do better than the likes of, actually quite a lot of teams potentially, including the likes of Albania, Hungary, potentially even Portugal, despite the fact that they have the great Ronaldo. So I definitely think that they would reach the next round just based on the talent they have at the back. Sergio Busquets is a phenomenal midfielder. I just don't know whether they'd be scoring the goals. But you know what? They'd fit right into this Euros. A team that would be really great defensively speaking and perhaps not as much with not as much talent going forward. I still don't think they'd be better than Spain combined, because we're talking about Spain can pick from so many different regions and they do have depth. So I'm not entirely sure whether they'd be anything less than what Catalonia has to present.
It is a really fascinating question, though, Tim. Remember when Yugoslavia, that was such a force in European football, split up, obviously, because of the Balkan trouble. Sorry, Mina, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, or even imagine if it's the Soviet Union rather than just Russia.
Well, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly, because you know that would be a great team, but right now you feel like Russia's going through a bit of an identity crisis. So perhaps if they were able to do that, what about the thought of Kosovo? How many other players are split up between the likes of Switzerland and Albania?
It's funny because the Soviet Union, or Russia, if you like, after the split up of the Soviet Union, lost all of those Ukrainian players, particularly, who were very effective. And again, with Yugoslavia, Croatia is doing better than Serbia, arguably. And I know, and it's a fascinating question, I think, because it goes right back to the heart of that question that seemed like it wasn't a question for the World Football Phone when Joe asked, what is in it for people who aren't football interested? This is geopolitics here. In Nigeria, for example, an example that I know very well, I know that without the Igbos playing for Nigeria would struggle. And, the Yorubas would be on one side, the Igbos would be another. And there are people who talk of the split of Nigeria in that way. Are there any kind of comparisons with that in South America, in your region, Tim?
Not really. I mean, it's a totally different situation from Africa in terms of the colonisation. Because let's take Nigeria, and how many different nationalities are there in the Nigerian people?
Oh, gosh, there's about 200, but four main ones. Yeah.
So you've got four main ones with historical identities that go back centuries and centuries and centuries.
Yeah, really three main ones. I was throwing in my little kind of mother's region in there as well. Three main ones, so apologies, yeah.
In South America, so many of the people are descendants of colonials. It's not the same in terms of a people being colonised as the Africans were, as the Indian subcontinent was. So what we don't have is regions that will trace their identity back 1,000 years in the way that some of the indigenous peoples, perhaps in Bolivia, Peru and Ecuador, might do that. But certainly towards the south of the continent, and the vast majority are European descendant and have arrived relatively recently. So it's not the same as those historical identities that in the Balkans or Catalonia have, which go back thousands and thousands of years. So it's really not the same situation. Just an update on the game. We're less than 10 minutes till half time. And Panama are worth a draw. Argentina have been very disappointing, but Panama have paid a price for their slack discipline. They've already had a man sent off. It's a long, long way to go with just 10 men. Still 1-0 to Argentina.
We have had one joke about Panama in tonight, suggesting that, never mind the Copa America, let's play the Panama tapes anyway, or the Panama Papers tapes, I think. Ben says, is it true that the Russian FA, Mina, broke down to Fabio Capello's compensation package, and have they had to cut corners with facilities, etc. at the Euros?
No, they're not broke. They did overpay and paid him money that they didn't actually have. But no, they're not quite broke. But if them cutting corners, that is because of different reasons rather than anything else. This is my point with Russia is I'm not entirely sure what their strategy is, because they want to host the World Cup. They want to have a great team. And obviously, as a country as big as them, who place such an emphasis on sport and winning and being champions, I find it strange how they handle their football team. It seems like, Russians in general, the team that they have now, most of them are homegrown, if not all of them, I think, barring one, who don't play outside of Russia. They're notoriously bad travelers. They don't like being away from their home country. And I just think that if you're trying to create something that's different, then you need to make more of an investment in your team, starting from grassroots, trying to allow to teach the players to expand their horizons, to learn something new, to go outside. And even their Russian Premier League is just not taking off. They've tried to bring in different coaches, different tactical ideas, and the likes of obviously Andrei Villas-Boas, Luciano Spalletti, but it seems like it's a country that's quite introverted when it comes to their football, and they need to be changing that. I think they produce a lot of talent, but when you don't have a lot of experience and the understanding of how the European football works in general, then they're going to struggle. And I find that is, at least with the Premier League, a lot of the English players obviously play at home, but we're talking about a league that is so international, that is experienced so many different tactics and things, but when it comes to the Russian FA, they don't know how to handle things. They just think, oh, we're just going to pay a lot of money here. Then they realize that they haven't spent the right money, and they're not growing the talent that they need to be growing, and they're fast-tracking a Ukrainian-born player here, and they're trying to change things. Everything seems to be a shortcut. They're not making the right investments to grow the sport and to encourage young players to go abroad, to find different things and bring it back to Russia and really invest in their home country.
Yeah, this from Alex. Is it just me that's been totally disappointed with how the United States have organised this Copa America tournament? Empty stadiums, inflated ticket prices, wrong national anthems, etc. Has there been any reaction in the Americas about this or not, south of the border, Tim?
Yeah, and Uruguay, who as we talked about earlier on, had that dreadful itinerary and had their national anthem not played. And the head of the Uruguayan FA said that this whole tournament is a mistake. That we South Americans, we shouldn't have done it. We shouldn't have let them do it. It was organised quickly. Problem here for Argentina. Di Maria has broken down again. He's asked to be substituted. I think Lamella's going to come on. The crowd is calling for Messi, but they're not going to get him yet. It's going to be Lamella for Di Maria. Bad news if that's another muscle tear and maybe losing him for the competition. We'll have to see. So there has been criticism. I understand the thing with the ticket prices because the US, they're hosting the thing, but they're not getting any of the TV money. The TV money is being split, 2/3 to the South American Confederation, 1/3 to the CONCACAF Confederation. So the only money that the US is getting is from ticket prices, hence the fact that the ticket prices are high. The stadiums, I think the crowds haven't been poor. The average crowd has been, I think, over the 40,000 mark. Remember, they're very big stadiums here in the United States. You're talking about stadiums with capacity 60,000, 70,000, something like that. So the crowds, and certainly the average crowds, far, far higher than they were a year ago for the Copa America in Chile, where much, much smaller stadiums were used. But yes, there is some grumbling about the organisation. All right, you get human error with the anthems. I mean, we had the Uruguay listening to the Chile national anthem. We had the Chile national anthem then drowned out by a song from Pitbull, which could have been a tribute to Gary Medel, the Chilean centre-back, who is nicknamed Pitbull.
Of course.
We had the Bolivian the Bolivian flag upside down, which I have a certain amount of sympathy because this is human error, and you're talking about a country where usually they have the World Series with only one national anthem being played because it's only themselves. Yeah.
But they have hosted international tournaments before, in case it's escaped your notice. They've even hosted a World Cup and, of course, the Olympic Games a few times,
Did they really misspell Colombia?
Adidas misspelt Columbia. Now, this is unbelievable. That's the shirt sponsor. It's been the shirt sponsor for years, and no one in England seems to know how to spell Columbia, and obviously perhaps no one in Germany as well. They always put the U in. It's not a U. It's an O.
Yeah, we know.
It's an O.
We know. Look, listen.
But if you sponsored the team for about 20 years, you should know how to spell the team.
Well. Yeah, the American comedian Steve Harvey is still getting over giving the wrong title, Miss World title. Was it he deprived Miss Columbia of it, or did he give it to Miss Columbia afterwards?
No, I think he gave it to Miss Columbia, and then
he gave it to Miss Columbia, and then he tweeted. Then he tweeted. No, he took it away from Miss Columbia, I think.
That's it.
And then he tweeted apologies to the Colombians, and he spelled it with a U.
I know. It was a disaster.
This is from John in Foxborough, which is in Massachusetts, long-time listener since the beginning to the World Football Phone-In. I'm currently at Foxborough Stadium in Massachusetts watching Chile versus Bolivia. Thanks to Tim's expertise, I can explain the banner being displayed by the Bolivian fans across the field from us to all around me. The strongest. See my picture. Yeah. My observation for today so far is that you need to commit GBH before a card is shown. Is this a preview? Is this a preview of how the Euros will be officiated? By the way, what a free kick by Campos for Bolivia. Before we come on to the Euro side of it,
what GBH?
Grievous bodily harm. Basically,
sorry.
You have to commit a criminal offence to get booked. Is the point he's trying to say?
Plenty of criminal offences in Argentina, Bolivia. Then we've already had 6 yellow cards, so we haven't got to half time yet.
Yeah.
So there's been quite a fair bit of GBH going on, which could be one reason that Messi not being risked so far, and the crowd calling for Messi when Di Maria pulled up. Still no sign of him. Maybe they think that Panama, with the strong arm tactics, maybe they might bring him on for the end, but they're a bit worried about him getting on the wrong end of a bit of a GBH.
Yeah, Lewis is in China, and this is a long one, so put your feet up, but it's an interesting one. Again, not necessarily directly football related, but it'll come on to that in a moment. Just bear with this one. Recently here in China, there's been a somewhat low-key race storm after the airing of a very racially derogatory laundry detergent advert. I've heard about this one, actually, in which a black man is thrown into a washing machine by a young, attractive Chinese woman, and after the cycle, out pops a Chinese man, basically.
Oh,
anyway,
my God.
Yeah, well, since living and teaching in... They do things differently, clearly. Since living and teaching in China, I often come across xenophobia and semi-racist opinions that still trickle down from older generations, suggesting a wider level of prejudice towards those with darker skin. I must stress that these opinions are usually not so specifically targeted to be insults, but are rather more in terms of making fun and laughing at those with darker skin as having an unwanted physical trait. As you know, Asian people champion fair skin as a sign of status. Well, many of them do. However, some of the most beloved foreign sports stars here are black, especially NBA stars like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, etc. I noticed this firsthand when I went to see my local side, Jiangsu Suning, play in the AFC Champions League last month, and the local fans sang with adoration for Brazilian stars Ramirez and Joe. I want to ask the panellists for more examples when football or sports transcend the social or racial prejudices that are seemingly inherent in a country, and those unnecessary judgments are forgotten for the duration of the game at the very least. Can you think of one, Mina? I was thinking the one that came to mind was what am I thinking of? Yeah, sorry, you carry on. You carry on. I was thinking of Mario Balotelli.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, that's actually a great example, to be honest. Especially with Italians and and the history that they have, and they've always been ones to complain about those that are naturalized Italians, not wanting them on the team or saying that they're not really, of the Italian brand. Even the likes of Mauro Camoranesi at some point suffered criticism for being part of the team when it was thought that, he wasn't really Italian. Mario Balotelli and Angelo Ogbonna actually as well, but Balotelli being the more famous one between the two, were seen as those, Italians of a different origin, really, and they suffered a lot of racist abuse. But at the same time, they were seen as symbols to carry Italy forward. It was a new Italy. It was, and interestingly, the government used them as examples to try to unite a country, to try to eradicate racism, despite Silvio Berlusconi's gaffes in public on a consistent basis. They were used as examples of trying to modernize the way that people think, trying to educate them with what's bad and what's not bad, and how you are, what is considered racist and what is just, a simply lack of education. So they garnered so much attention, and Balotelli still has so many fans, despite the fact that he's somewhat of not a great player anymore to many people, in many people's opinions, one who hasn't really made it, one who hasn't made the Euro squad, one who Liverpool doesn't want and Milan don't want, and he doesn't really have a home or a club at the moment. He's seen as a man that everyone still loves, everyone wants to watch, everyone always cheers him on. He came on for a few minutes in Milan, and you see the whole stadium's interested in what he has to do, and everyone's cheering him on, despite this being a tradition, a country that's often criticized for their racism in football and for their right-wing politics. So yeah, Balotelli is a great example of it. I think Austria and David Alaba is also an interesting story as well, because this is a country where there's a lot of people there who like their right-wing politics, and he alongside his actual team are transcending that trend, are trying to unite a country, are showing the benefits of a different approach, of an open mind, and that's why you sort of want to cheer Austria on a lot as well. So football has that potential, and I think that's why it's interesting. Sport has that potential. Again, you just see what's happened with Muhammad Ali, and he's uniting people who have so many things to say about certain individuals, about his religion, about his background, and yet now he united people in that, and that's what football's doing.
Yeah, it's interesting though. Just before you come on, Tim, the example that I know, of course, is always going to be related to Scandinavia, and in Sweden, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, there's been no question mark whatsoever that he's anything but Swedish. And even
but that's different, right?
Why?
That's because.
Why?
That's because he's bought into that. I mean, he's sort of, on some occasions, I would say that he's trying to forget his background, and he's immersed himself fully. He always talks about suffering when he arrived, and about going through the hardships of being an immigrant in Sweden, and what his father put him through at the time because of his alcoholic nature. But it seems like he always wanted to be accepted by his adopted country. He was so desperate for that.
Doesn't Balotelli, though?
Yeah, Balotelli is different, though, because Balotelli has a divisive sort of approach in life. Nothing to do really with where he's from, but he's a different... For me, Sweden also is a different country to Italy. Sweden is notoriously known to embrace everyone, and they are a country that has an open-door policy. And there are so many, as in they take in refugees, they want to unite a country. They're seen as the most open in Europe.
They are seen that way, but my experience was I experienced the most racism I've ever experienced in life in Sweden. Despite that, on the surface, of course, officially, they're not like that, but unofficially, you find the most racism. The thing that I find interesting about Zlatan is that when he speaks Swedish, he has a very, very heavy, foreign accent. So immediately, somebody like that would be dismissed immediately as not being Swede if he went for a job, for example, or whatever it might be. Whereas Mario Balotelli, if I'm correct, does speak Italian like an Italian.
Yeah, raised by Italian parents, adopted by Italian parents.
With an
he's Italian through and through.
Yeah,
and an Italian name. He's Mario Balotelli. So, and much the same as Angelo Ogbonna, they're Italians through and through. Yes, I can see your point, because he genuinely is an immigrant who, is from another country and hasn't changed, hasn't been adopted by Swedish parents. But then I was just about to name you another example of this. But also, what about Zinedine Zidane in France?
It's a very good example.
That was another thing, that there's been so much to do with North Africans, especially Algerians, who are particularly good for the squad, or particularly good players who perhaps tend to be rejected by the country and what's going on.
But funnily enough, they weren't rejected. The funny thing about the 1998 World Cup was that Jean-Marie Le Pen tried to jump on the fact
bandwagon.
that half of these players have their origins elsewhere. And the vast majority of French people came out and say, no, you can't go there. You can't go there. This is our generation. Do you know what I mean? He suffered a backlash as a result of that. And I think that drew a line under any question as to whether these people were French or not.
Yeah, exactly that. And Zinedine Zidane being the man that sort of, grabbed that team and pushed them forward, being the main talisman, the symbol of unification, it changed the way that France approached the game, or at least you thought that.
And it helped that they won the World Cup.
Yeah, it helped that they won the World Cup. But then you look at their problems now, and it feels like it hasn't been. They have the same issues, and we're talking about several years later. And now Didier Deschamps, who was captain of that side, captain of one of the greatest French teams that we've ever watched, one where it had talent in every position, and is now being accused of the fact that he left out Karim Benzema and Hatem Ben Arfa due to, or at least according to what Benzema thinks, he was sort of pushed into a bad decision as such. I don't know, obviously, I'm not accusing him of the same, but Cantona's comments don't help. And it just seems like that country isn't evolving past all these problems at the moment, no matter how much football is trying to unite a country that has people from different origins and different backgrounds. But Belgium is doing a much better job. I think Marc Wilmots is an amazing coach. He's really managed to sort of, bring together a country that can be divided at times, make friends, the different dialects, the different origins, those who speak Flemish, those who don't. And he's just united a team, made them all friends. And that in turn has changed the way that Belgium approaches things, or at least it's inspiring them for the better. So when you look at what he's doing, that is an exceptional way to handle the procedures. And that's when you think football is a great thing, because at the moment you speak to you speak to the likes of Dembele or company, and you ask them what it is Belgium, or Nangolan, a man of Indonesian descent, and they just tell you this is a country where we feel at home, we're so proud of it, we want to inspire the people. And you can see there's a genuine change there, because when it comes to Belgium and supporting their team, everyone is on board, despite the fact that it's a fractured nation or to many people.
And arguably the Dutch are very similar as well. And let's not forget England and Wales and, Northern Ireland and Ireland as well. And Scotland, of course, can't forget them as well. But maybe they haven't gone through that very experience, but who knows? I'm sure that they would handle it with the necessary aplomb. And Tim, we can't wait to get your answer on South America in just a moment. Yeah, another 23 minutes of the World Football Phone-In to go this morning. So talking football in Europe and North America. I don't know how to build this Copa America. Should I say it's a South American tournament, even though it's taking place in North America, Tim?
Yeah, because it's celebrating the centenary of the world's oldest continental tournament, which is South American.
Yeah,
so yes,
South American plus North America or the United States this time around.
Well, South American plus region. North American dollars, I think, mainly.
And the CONCACAF region.
Yeah.
So this year it's not a South American tournament, is it?
No, it's mixed. It's of the Americas, but it's still the Copa America, which is the South American competition.
So how should
the CONCACAF region has its own competition called the Gold Cup.
I know. So how should I bill it?
Just call it the Copa America.
No, but if people don't know what the Copa America is, I can't just say it's a South American tournament, but it happens to be taking place in the United States. And oh, by the way, the United States and Mexico and all these other countries are also involved in it. How should I bill it, mate?
All right, it's a tournament involving the 10 nations of South America, plus six from the north.
Okay, that's a long way. That's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it?
From someone called Dotun Adebayo, I don't think it's a bit of a mouthful at all.
That was a low blow. Tim Vickery, that was a low blow. Anyway, hold that thought, because we still get your thoughts on the way that players, particularly in Brazil, I imagine, that the skin might not matter if the footballer's success is there. We've got Sheyi with us in Lagos, Nigeria. Sheyi, do you mind me asking what your surname is? Do you mind me asking that?
My surname is Sonny.
Yeah, okay. Oh, so it's not quite a mouthful. It's not quite, I was hoping you'd say Sheyi Adebayo or something like that. But, Sheyi, because Tim Vickery was just talking about how Nigerian names might be a mouthful. I thought you'd come back and support me on that one.
You're on your own.
I'm on my own. So, but Sheyi, you've got a question on both the Coppers and the Euros. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Basically, I just wanted to ask, why is it that most host nations, the USA and today France, they just seem to choke when they're host? Is it like the whole occasion is just too much for them to bear, or because France have gone almost 10 games and then they've been playing very well? The USA too, they also had a very good run of form. And then all of a sudden they got thumped by Colombia. In fact, it was boys versus men, that first match. And then the same thing almost happened with France as well today. So is it why does host nations basically just always seem to choke when it matters most?
Let's take Tim first. We'll come on to you in a moment, Mina, to talk about the events of last night. But Tim, why is it that host nations tend to choke, particularly on the first match of a tournament?
Because it's a game of emotions, it's a game of human beings, and it's a game, football, where to play it well, you've got to click collectively. There's lots of things that can go wrong, and just being a little bit emotionally off kilter can make you take wrong decisions, make you not do things you would do normally, or try to do things that you wouldn't do normally, and that can throw the whole balance of the side. And remember the opening game. You've been building towards it. You've been thinking of it for ages and ages and ages. And come the big day, that can all be a little bit too much. I remember saying this time last week when I was watching, as we were on, I was watching Colombia beat the United States. I remember saying, well, I wouldn't discount the United States totally. Once they get this game out of their system, I think they're capable of more. I think in general, in tournaments, it's very harsh to judge teams on the first game because it is the product of a build-up, and it's such a jump from the warm-up friendlies to the first competitive match. By the second match, then that emotion is a little bit easier to control. And look at Brazil in the 2014 World Cup. And I remember Scolari and his coaching team giving a lecture to Brazilian coaches. I was there 6 months before the World Cup. And the feeling of confidence that they radiated, if you could have bottled it, you would have made an absolute fortune. They were so confident. And the message that was coming from them was, we've done the hard part. We've found our team. We've got the identity of our team. And so when they met up, 6 months later, the players met up before the tournament, one of the coaching staff, Carlos Alberto Parreira, who'd won the World Cup with Brazil as a coach in his own right, he said, we already have one hand on the trophy. And then what happens? Reality happens. And during the course of that World Cup, you saw, under the pressure of the emotion, and the captain, Thiago Silva, had been saying even before that he was losing sleep, worrying about it, as reality revealed itself to be harder than Brazil had expected, as the Confederations Cup was revealed to have been a pretty poor practice ground for the World Cup, you saw emotionally that team crumble, and that certainty that they'd had in December, it just melted away. And then come the actual occasion, the team were crying before the game, crying during the game, and crying after the game. It's a game of emotions, and sometimes those emotions can be just too much for the team to function.
It is about emotions, but Shay's question is specifically about why teams choke in that opening match of the tournament. And
why host? Why the host?
Well, the host, the host team.
The pressure on them is even more, and they're just surrounded with it. I mean, Chile.
Where is that pressure coming from? Is it the media pressure? Is it the pressure of a nation on your shoulders? Because you said
both.
But you said it.
Both. I mean, Chile last year they hosted the Copa America and they won it. They had to abandon the plan in the end, but their plan was to go and do all of their preparation work in Europe. and only come to Chile a day or two before the tournament, because the coach, he just wanted to insulate them as much as possible from that host pressure, that pressure of just going to the newsstand and everything is we're going to win, we're going to win. The pressure of the player going back to his apartment block and the concierge saying, you're going to put 3 past them tomorrow, aren't you? That builds up and it builds up and it builds up, and it clearly has an effect. Now, teams generally do better at home. If they can get over that original hump, then home advantage tends to work in your advantage. Tends to be home advantage, but it's a powerful thing which can work against you, as I think we clearly saw with Brazil 2 years ago.
Okay, how about last night's match then, Mina?
Firstly, I also think that if you're talking about hosts, it also depends on how big the country is in footballing terms. France is a huge nation, and if anything, it probably, it's considered a good footballing nation that's produced great teams. And there's a special pressure on them because of the fact that when they hosted the Euros, they won it. When they hosted the World Cup, they won it. They have a record of always winning it when they are hosting the tournament. So now more than ever, the pressure is on them because they do have a team of talented individuals. They have 2 rising stars in Antoine Griezmann and Paul Pogba. They are in a country at the moment that has an emergency threat level. I mean, you saw Dimitri Payet walk off crying because a lot of those are, and him as well as Kante have just come into this team when a lot of people didn't know who they were before, or perhaps they weren't as well recognized as they are now, players that are making the difference. Kante was unbelievable, Payet was too. And I think that a lot of people, when it comes to your first game, you never know how it's going to go because you never know how good the opponent's going to be. And a lot of people thought Romania was a bad squad. I don't know why. Based alone on their defensive record, it was going to be tough to score past them anyway. But this is coming when you can see like politicians in the stands and your families there and you're carrying a nation's. With France, you're not just carrying their footballing dreams, you're carrying political views, you're carrying so much on your shoulders that it becomes tougher. When Austria and Switzerland hosted it in 2008, there wasn't as much pressure on them to win it because, let's be honest, Austria at the time hadn't reached the levels that they have reached now. They admitted themselves they were not ready yet, that there still needed to be more investment, more tactical understanding, better generation of players, who they were going to be at the right age for this tournament, and now they're good enough now to play in France. But I think a lot of it has to do with Germany, for example, in 2006, when they hosted the World Cup. They genuinely believed they were going to win it. They came in somewhat arrogant into that. They had shirts printed. They already had the merchandise ready, claiming themselves to be winners. That obviously bit them in the end, and they didn't win it. But when you are a big nation, such as Brazil, such as Germany, such as France, when it comes to in footballing terms, the pressure's even higher, especially when you boast great individuals who are worth 100 million plus on the transfer market. And it's like, imagine penalties. The whole world is watching you and you alone. No one, look at the way that Romania took their penalty. It was a great one, so confident, because what was going to happen if they lost? It doesn't matter, right? No one is expecting them to win, but everyone's expecting France to win. And you'll see that all the big teams will struggle. You saw Spain struggle. You saw big teams going at the first round in the group stage of the World Cup, and they weren't hosting the tournament. We're talking about Italy. We're talking about Spain. We're talking about England. They all exited at the group stage because sometimes the pressure just becomes too much because too many people are expecting too much from you. And then you end up taking shots from distance when you shouldn't, when you should be trying to play a better pass in the way that Paul Pogba did in the first half. It's things like that. You end up losing your mind. How many players are too emotional to make it to the big stage? That's my problem with Paul Pogba. I watch him day in and day out, and for me, he's too emotional. Alvaro Morata, another, too emotional. They succumb to those feelings, and when they feel frustrated, they're not at their best, despite Pogba having a good game actually today. Cavani, another one, too emotional sometimes. But these are human beings, and that's what makes them sometimes excellent players and sometimes frustrated.
What about from the Nigerian perspective, Sheyi? What about Nigeria? First of all, is it a big footballing nation, or is it so small that it doesn't choke? And also, what about the players? Are they like Paul Pogba, emotional, or are they made of steel? Are they human beings or not?
Human beings.
For Nigeria, I remember very well when we hosted the Nations Cup in 2000, Ghana, Nigeria. We got to the final, and all of a sudden, we lost to Cameroon. So, and everybody, I was in the stadium that day as well.
Did they choke? Did they choke?
Yes, we did choke. We choked at the end, the final. A little better to lose your first match.
So
we lost in the final.
So Nigeria doesn't choke at the opening match; it chokes at the end. How does that work?
Funny enough, each time we come second in the Nations Cup, we tend to lose to Cameroon. It's always Cameroon beating us at the final. But now we're overcoming now. Now they are sisters now, anyway.
Yeah.
So,
but they're the dominable Lions, aren't they? But how do you explain? Because both Mina and Tim were saying that after that initial match, the tournament progresses and the team feel a little bit more comfortable. Are you saying it's the opposite with Nigeria then? After the initial match where they feel very comfortable, they become less and less comfortable as the tournament goes on. Does that explain why you choke in the final?
Probably. You just never know in Nigeria these days, And are you aware we lost the last coach, the one that won our last Nations Cup?
Yes.
Are you aware we lost him during the week?
Yes.
Right, so we say rest in peace to him.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point actually. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that, Shay. Yeah, the Nigerian coach passed away during the week. Thanks a lot for the call.
Steve Keshi, the big boss.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant coach, by the way.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you. And it was great to get a call from Lagos as well. It would have been better if his name was unpronounceable and a mouthful like mine is. This is from Paul in Bangkok. Excellent debate, a listener question on race. Your point. Oh, we still haven't had your response to that, Tim, but maybe... You go ahead first of all. I do apologise for holding that thought.
No problem.
So the South American perspective on colour, if you like, does football mitigate against it or not?
Yeah, it wasn't just colour. It was, I think, identity in general, bringing people together in general. And one example that sprung to my mind, in Argentina, there's a lot of poor immigrants from Bolivia and Paraguay. And as with poor immigrants everywhere, they can get the nasty end of the stick. And football crowds sometimes sing racist chants about them. And this was happening in the stadium of Racing. Now, Racing's star player, a promising young Paraguayan, Oscar Romero, is Paraguayan. And so he heard the fans of his club making racist chants, or racist but certainly nationalist, about Paraguayans. And he just went over to the sidelines and told the crowd to stop doing it. And they responded, and they responded, and they gave him a round of applause and started and chanting Paraguay, which I thought was absolutely terrific. I thought it was great that he challenged it in that way. I was thinking when the question was asked, because I think it originally went far beyond race, in terms of bringing people together. A couple of examples from England came to my mind. The German, Bert Trautmann. Now, a German prisoner of war in England who ended up being the goalkeeper for Manchester City. Straight after the war, imagine the hostility that he must have faced. But through his conduct, he gave people a different image of Germans, and I think he helped bring people together. And one that's very strong from my adolescence is Ozzy Ardiles at Tottenham. When England and Argentina went to war, and the English tabloid press was full of things about how vile the Argentines were. And you just looked at Ardiles and you knew that it was all rubbish, and you couldn't get a more perfect gentleman than Ardiles. And he had to leave the country in the wake of that war in '82, but he came back pretty quickly. And I think his mere presence and the way that he conducted himself gave the lie to a lot of the nationalist nonsense that was in the English tabloid press. Yeah,
this, as I said, is an email from Paul in Bangkok, from Ealing, though. Long-time listener. He says, excellent debate and listener question on race. Your point on the contrast between real-life experience and official state policy on race was excellent. Right now, we're hearing Ali being remembered as a universal soldier, which may be beautiful, but it doesn't escape the fact that too many times in our current era, ordinary people can have high aspirations when it comes to celebrities, but abandon such sentiments when dealing with their co-workers and neighbours. And I think that's an excellent point. You're absolutely right. For some reason, we think that the celebrity or the sports star that we worship is, above the kind of abuse that we can dish out to ordinary people. That's a very good point. Anyway, he says, Nina, you said and agreed with him. You'll be pleased to hear this. He says, really love Nina, but I hope she learned that we can't take things for face value when we're looking at the complex nuance of race relations. But, you know that anyway, so I don't need to say that to you at all, do I, Nina?
No, it's not. But it's like, of course, but it is a fairy tale, right? That's why you watch football. It's escapism. It's why you watch movies. It's escapism. It's inspiration. You go back home and you hope that you can be the person that you are when you watch that movie, or you hope you have the same thoughts when you watch that game. But ultimately, real life takes over, and that's real life. And sometimes you're not that great of a person, or your ideals cannot be fulfilled in the way that you would hope them to be. But sport has a habit of changing views, and people transcend color. I mean, look at O.J. Simpson. That's the perfect example. I mean, this is a man who, managed to change how people thought about whether he was guilty or not guilty based on how good of a footballer he was. That, this is the thing about football. It makes you think about nothing else except for idealistic things, and that's why we watch it, to escape our little lives at some point. Obviously not O.J. Simpson, but I'm talking about our football in general. Watching the Euros and listening to these great stories of why is everyone really happy with Leicester City. In general, these are stories that inspire you. It's just a little time out from your hectic life and your horrible life, or whatever it is you're suffering. You'll look at Mario Balotelli, or you'll look at these different players and hope that maybe somewhere along the road they'll inspire someone else to do something decent.
How about this question or this comment from one of our listeners? In the Euro 2012, there were 21% draws in the league stage. Will there be more or less in 2016? In terms of draws, Copa Americas, do they generally end in draws, do you think? Or is there a large percentage of them that end in draws?
Well, the group phase usually in the Copa America is a little bit of a phony war, because the normal competition is with 12 countries and 8 of them qualify. So you've got to try pretty hard not to qualify. That's different this time around, because now this special one, we've got 16 teams and 8 qualify. So this time it's harder, which means, I think, that's one of the reasons for the level of football picking up, because you can't scrape in, or it's harder to scrape in. You got to play your way in, which is obviously good for the tournament. And the news now: here's Messi. We're going to get half an hour of Messi. Argentina still leading Panama 1-0.
Unfortunately, we're not going to get half an hour of Messi, because there's only about another 3 minutes of this phone to go. And we've got a very special guest with us tonight, Andrew the Gent in London. Good morning.
Good morning. I haven't been on for a while. Dotun, just before I start, my previous occupation is sort of prompts me to say this. A little lesson in pronunciation for you, Dotun.
Oh, go on.
Are you listening carefully?
Yeah, his previous occupation, for those who don't know, was he was an English teacher at a school, and he even taught, what's the name of the comedian again?
Jim Davidson.
That's right. And I'm chalky to Jim Davidson.
Yeah, Dotun, you mentioned a player whose name is spelled Bojan. In Eastern Europe, the J is pronounced like we would pronounce the Y.
Yeah,
it's not Bojan, it's Bojan.
I know. Mr. Bojangles taught me that.
I was thinking the same thing. Mr. Bojangles.
Now, I know I haven't got much time, so very quickly.
Go on.
Interesting take. The top scorer in the Bundesliga easily was Robert Lewandowski, playing for Bayern Munich.
And that's Lewandowski with a W, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm learning.
He scored 30 league goals. If you count European games, cup games, 43 goals this season. So the German defences couldn't cope with him. But when Poland played Germany, most of the defenders playing against him will be his teammates from Borussia Dortmund, we used to play for, and for Bayern Munich. So I wonder how you people think he will get on against his teammates.
Mina, do you want to take that quick?
Yeah, well, you remember what he did to Manuel Neuer, right? He embarrassed him a little bit in that match, and that's his teammate when they did play each other. So I think that, I'll be honest, I don't really like the German backline. I think it's weak against someone who's as powerful and as gifted as he is. I think they're going to struggle. They know him, but also the advantage is he knows them. He knows their weaknesses as well. And it's all based on tactics and how they're going to play and whether or not they're going to be roundly protected by those ahead of them in midfield, which I'm not entirely sure they will be. So I think there is a chance that they'll be left alone and exposed. And considering how gifted he is, one of the best strikers that there is at the moment, I think he'll come out on top.
And for those who don't know, the gent does have a Polish root in him. And incidentally, gent, you know, my 15-year-old loves Robert Lewandowski because it's the only celebrity that is kind of like her name, because her name is Lewa. And although I should call her Lever from now on because she's got a W. Her name's Lewa and Lewandowski. And when are we going to hear from the gent again? It's been too long.
Well, occasionally I do try, but I can't. I must be in the bad books of your editor because
Stay
I had
awake.
a really interesting story.
I know. We tell it next week, okay? Mina, Tim, thanks very much.
On digital and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
bbc.co.uk/5live.